Have you ever boarded a bus so late at night that you questioned if you'd ever make it home? Imagine this. You're the last passenger left, the city lights fade away, and suddenly, the bus isn't heading anywhere familiar. What would you do if the ride never ended? The night began like any other. I had stayed late at work finishing up a project, and by the time I clocked out, the streets were eerily quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears, making even your own breathing sound too loud. The bus stop was deserted. No one else was around. No cars, no pedestrians, not even the occasional stray cat. The streetlight above me flickered, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. I checked my phone. It was down to 2%, but I kept refreshing the bus schedule, hoping the last bus hadn't already come and gone. Finally, I saw it. A bus creeping through the fog, its headlights dim and sputtering like dying candles. It was strange. I hadn't heard it approach. One moment, the street was empty. The next, the bus was there, stopping in front of me with a loud hiss. The doors creaked open, and a chill washed over me, though I wasn't sure if it was from the cold air or something else entirely. I hesitated for a moment, but what choice did I have? I stepped aboard. As I climbed the steps, the first thing I noticed was the driver. He was an older man, his face pale and almost lifeless. His eyes, dark and sunken, seemed to look straight through me. He didn't greet me, didn't ask for a fare. He simply motioned for me to take a seat. The bus was dimly lit, the fluorescent lights overhead buzzing faintly. There were a handful of passengers, but something about them was off. There was an old man near the front, rocking slightly as he mumbled to himself. A woman sat clutching a bag so tightly her knuckles were white, her eyes darting nervously to the door. Toward the back was a man in a suit, sitting unnaturally still, his hands resting perfectly on his knees as he stared straight ahead. I found a seat near the middle, my body tensing with an inexplicable unease. The air on the bus was cold, colder than it should have been. It smelled faintly of dampness and something metallic, like rust or blood. As the bus pulled away, I tried to shake the feeling. It was just a late-night ride, I told myself. Nothing to worry about. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. For the first few minutes, everything seemed normal. The bus moved through quiet streets, the occasional streetlight casting fleeting pools of light through the windows. I leaned my head against the glass, watching the world blur by, and tried to relax. But then I noticed something strange. We passed the same gas station twice. At first, I thought I must have been mistaken, but then we passed it a third time. I frowned, glancing around to see if anyone else had noticed. The old man was still mumbling, the woman still clutching her bag, and the man in the suit hadn't moved an inch. "Hey," I called out to the driver, moving toward the front. "You've been going in circles. Did you miss a turn?" The driver didn't even glance at me. His hands gripped the wheel tightly, his knuckles bone white. "Sit down," he said, his voice low and gravelly. Something in his tone made my stomach drop. I backed away, returning to my seat, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't just lost. Something was very, very wrong. The bus stopped suddenly, the brakes screeching like nails on a chalkboard. The man in the suit stood up without a word and walked toward the door. "Wait," I said, but he didn't stop. He stepped off the bus and the doors closed behind him. I turned to look out the window, expecting to see him walking down the street, but he was gone. There was no one there, just fog. Thick, swirling fog that seemed to pulse like it was alive. I turned to the woman clutching her bag. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice shaking. She glanced at me, her eyes wide with fear, and whispered, "Don't speak. They're watching." "Who's watching?" I demanded, but she just shook her head, tears streaming down her face. The old man laughed, a dry, hollow sound that sent shivers down my spine. "You can't leave," he said, his voice almost playful. "Not until it's your time." I stared at him, my heart pounding. "What are you talking about?" He didn't answer. He just kept laughing, rocking back and forth as the bus started moving again. The bus kept driving, but no matter how far we went, we always ended up in the same place. The same gas station, the same bakery, the same flickering street lights. I checked my phone, but the battery was dead. The clock on the bus was stuck at 12:47 a.m. Time wasn't moving. The woman with the bag was the next to go. She stood up abruptly, her hands trembling. "I can't stay here," she muttered, rushing toward the door. "Don't!" I yelled, but it was too late. She stepped off the bus, and just like the man in the suit, she vanished. I turned to the old man, who was still grinning. "What's happening?" I demanded. "Where is this bus going?" He leaned closer, his breath foul and cold. "You'll see soon enough," he said. The bus stopped again, and I realized we were back at my stop, the stop where I had boarded. But something was different. The streetlights were dimmer, the buildings darker. It looked abandoned. That's when I felt it. A presence behind me. Slowly I turned around, and there he was, a man dressed in black, sitting in the seat directly behind mine. I hadn't seen him board, and he hadn't been there before. His face was hidden in shadow, but I could feel his eyes on me. He leaned forward, his breath cold against my neck, and whispered, "You shouldn't have gotten on." I froze, my mind racing. "What do you mean?" I stammered, but when I turned back around, he was gone. The seat was empty, but there was a faint, wet stain where he had been sitting. The driver's voice crackled over the intercom. "Final stop," he said. "Everyone off." The old man laughed again. "It's your turn," he said, his grin widening. I hesitated, my heart pounding. The doors creaked open, revealing nothing but darkness outside. A cold wind swept through the bus, and I knew I couldn't stay. I stepped off the bus. The moment my feet hit the ground, the bus vanished. 1 second it was there, the next, it was gone, leaving nothing but silence and fog. I looked around, trying to get my bearings. But the street I had stepped onto wasn't mine. The buildings were decayed, their windows shattered. The air was thick with the smell of rot. I turned to look for the bus stop, but it wasn't there. Instead, there was a sign. "Thank you for riding. We'll see you again soon." My phone buzzed in my pocket. Somehow, it had turned back on. A message appeared on the screen. "You can't run forever." I dropped the phone and ran. But no matter how far I go, I can't escape the feeling that the bus is still out there, waiting for me.